Alrighty, we are on page Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. That would be 77b1 in the art scroll. Okay, we're going to go back to the beginning a little bit, up a drop. We're talking about Rava's different cases. We're still Rava's different cases. Hi, we're going through Rava's different cases of Grama. Let's go back a bit. And we go into Grama, we go into Koach Koichai, which is direct strength or a byproduct of strength. It's interesting, the Gemara doesn't bring at any point the classic case. And we finish off on page to the Mishnah, different laws of when is it considered murder, and what kind of condition does the person who's murdered need to be for it to be considered halachically murdered for the Bezdin to take action. And in what case does the Bezdin take action? There's a lot of loopholes. Again, like the Rambam says, doesn't mean the person doesn't get punished, but it's questions if the court has to take action or not. Okay, we're going to go back to the top of the page, second line, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, where it says Siman. Okay, so the Siman is Sulam, Tris, Samanin, and Koisel, which is four cases that Rav is going to bring, where we analyze if the person who uses in one of those four cases, is that if it's considered a proper grama, is it an immediate cause of your involvement in the murder of this person, or if there's a way for the Torah to make it not permissible, obviously, God forbid, but where the Bezdin won't take action. And again, like the Rambam says, the one who takes action, Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will deal with this person. But the question is, and in certain cases, Bezdin takes outside of the box action, like I said, they'll lock someone up and feed him certain foods if they find a pattern in the person's behavior. Not all the cases are intentional. Not all the cases are considered an intentional case. Could even be cases that Rashi talks about that are by mistake. But the question is, do you have to go into exile? Which is a scenario that a person who kills someone by mistake has to do. Okay, so back to the beginning. Amar Rava says, top of the page, Dachvu lebar. Go through these two cases quickly. You push someone into a pit. Okay, so visulam babar. Now, obviously, we have to assume that pushing the person in the pit, whatever's in the pit is going to kill the person immediately. Otherwise, we're back to starvation and a loose grama. Again, Rava defined in the previous page. There's a difference between immediate grama, means if you hold someone's head under the water, the act of holding someone's head is not murder. It's not that your hand on the person's head that kills the person. It's your hand on the person's head that forces the person's head to be under the water that kills the person. So it's the water that kills the person. But you holding your hand there, you're not allowing the person to get out and breathe, and therefore drowns. Same thing with fire. The fire kills the person, and you didn't put the fire on the person. You're just holding the person in the fire. So Rava says those cases, the Mishnah clearly says, not Rava, the Mishnah clearly says that's a case of tzimtzum, of restraining a person, that's murder. The question is, if you restrain a person in the case where it causes the person to die. So if you put the person, like we learned last week, you put the person in a regular environment in the weather, and the person then knowing the sun is going to come out and kill the person, let's say in an extremely hot desert, so right away the sun is going to come out when it rises and kill the person. That's Rava says it's not the case in the Mishnah, because the sun right now is not there. You're just causing the person you're holding. You're containing the person that eventually the sun is going to come and kill the person. Okay. So Rava says over here, therefore I'm saying is, when the case of the bar, or the pit, we must assume either the pit has water in it, and the person can't get out of the pit because there's water, or you have to assume that there's something that's in the pit that would kill the person immediately, like snakes and scorpions. If I'm not mistaken, halachically, I think a scorpion, I'm trying to remember where I've seen this, either the Rambam, Maimonides, or something. A scorpion is a kind of insect or animal that is considered a guaranteed murder. I mean, it's not even a question that maybe the scorpion will bite, etc. So Amar Rava, Dachvu lebar, you push the person in the bar. A person pushes another person in a bar, v'sulam a bar, and there's a way for the person to get out. There's a ladder. And someone takes away the ladder. So now there's no more a way for the person to get out of the bar. And right now the person's going to die from whatever's in the bar immediately. And he has or she has no way of getting out. if someone else takes it out. And he says, not only if someone else takes it out. Hey, Beth, not only if someone else takes it out. Who called the masilka? Even the person himself runs. And Rashi says, before the person falls, because once the person falls and then you take it out afterwards, and then it's for sure it's grama. But he right away, before he falls down, so he never really has a chance to get out. But when he pushed them, the act of pushing wasn't involved murder, because at the time when he pushed, he could have, she could have, he should have, or he or she could have climbed out, even though he himself, before he even had a chance, pulled the ladder away. Potter, again, Bezdin won't put this person to death. To be Idna, because Rava describes why, because we need the Idna the Idna the Shaide, because at the moment he was pushed, the person could have gotten out, even though when he fell, he couldn't have gotten out, but when he was pushed, he could have gotten out. Rava says another case. This is the second case, and we learned these both cases last week. Zarak Chaitz, you shoot an arrow, and the person has a taris. Taris is a shield. So the arrow right now is not lethal because you have a shield. Now the person takes away the shield, and now there's nothing to protect the person from this arrow. Again, even if you run fast and take away the shield ahead of the arrow, Potter. That's again, it's not considered a case of murder where the Bezdin will try this as a murder case. The Beidna the Shaida, because when he shot or she shot the arrow, is mifsik psika gerei. There was something that would prevent it from killing. So the difference between the case of the bore of the pit and the arrow is the preventative. By the case of the bore, the full action of what you've done is in theory murder, right? You threw the person in, and that's already done. However, there was a way to get out of it, and that was that you would climb out of the bore with the ladder. Over here, it's the case is different. You're shooting an arrow at the person. The only reason why it's not murder is because the person has a shield to block the arrow. So it's not exactly the same case as the ladder. We have to understand, because a person could say, in the case of the arrow, in the case of the ladder, there was a third party thing of protection, a way out of the problem. Here, there's a protection from the problem. So therefore, Rav wants, again, the Gemara never just looks to quote. Gemara is not looking to fill the pages with information. If the Gemara quotes scenarios, like we're going to see later on, the Gemara, each scenario has to teach us something additional. The difference between the arrow and the pushing is we see in Rava's reasoning. In the reasoning of the pushing into the pit, Rava says, because when I pushed you, there was a ladder. So my pushing wasn't an act of murder. Shooting an arrow is like shooting a gun in theory in those days. It's slower. So when you shoot an arrow, that itself is an act of murder. The only reason the person's to be protected is not because that the act itself wasn't an act. It was because he has a way to protect himself from the act, or she has a way to protect herself from the act, which is a shield. You take away the shield, and now he's vulnerable. She's vulnerable. Whoever's shooting or whoever's receiving. Okay, those are the two cases we learned last week. Now we're going to learn the next case. The next case is the samanin, is the anointment, meaning to say like the medicine. What happens if you shoot someone or you do something to someone, right? What was the case many times we have in spy games, right? Where a government will go. We had the case many years ago. Those who remember the case of Mashal, when Israel went and injected poison in Mashal, and they had the antidote. They had the medicine that could protect them from it. And the Israelis were forced to apply it to him, to give it to him, and he saved his life. I mean, they gave it poison, but there was a medicine to prevent it. So here also, Rav is another case. It doesn't give the case of a lethal injection, but the same idea. Rav says, Zarak by Chaitz, you shoot an arrow at a person. V'samanin v'yadai, and the person has some sort of ointment, some sort of medicine, that even though he's going to get hit, means he doesn't have, now this is even more extreme than the second case. The first case is the least extreme. When you push, there's a ladder. Second case is you're shooting something to kill, but the person has a bulletproof vest. That's his person. That's what he has. He has a shield, the one who's receiving. Now we have a third case. You're going to shoot the person and it's going to hit the person. So the actual act of a lethal act that will kill the person has been done. Why shouldn't this person be considered a murderer? because he knows at the time when he shoots you that you have the remedy to fix yourself. You have a medicine that you could take that would prevent you from dying, even though you've been shot. You have the medicine. How does that work with an arrow? I don't know. Maybe it's talking about a poisonous arrow, whatever it is. I mean, obviously, the Gemara is not just saying.
It's probably assuming that the wound is going to fester and you have something to put off sepsis. I assume.
Could be, but something like that, something along the lines that you have something, something that that would not allow it to kill you. Rashi says, "What's samanin? Haroyin l'rfuasei." A kind of thing that would help him in his healing, and it's in the hand of the person who's getting killed. Uba acher, and another person comes. Ufizran, and let's say it's right. It has to be kept together, and someone takes it and just spills it out. So now there's no moiment, and now he or she has been hit with a lethal strike, and there's no way to cure themselves and heal themselves. Or again, Rava says, "Afilu who called them pizron." Even when in the case where there's a third person, it's obviously less extreme because I pushed the person in the bar, someone else took out the ladder. I shot an arrow, someone else took the shield. I shot an arrow, someone else took the medicine. This is maybe even So but here the case is you run and take out the ladder, you run and take out the shield, and here you run and take the medicine and spill it out. So you're actually preventing the person from healing himself or herself. So what would be the case in such a case? Why? Again, the beidna de shada, because when you shot the arrow, the person who shot the arrow, yechel hisrapesava. There was what to be healed from. I don't know the details of the case that's been very popular in the past year of Alec Baldwin shooting what he thought was a blank gun at someone and killing them. But these are along the lines of these questions of what's how do we analyze? How do we consider murder? Again, this is a case of Bezdin, because in the case where the person himself goes and takes away the medicine, the ladder, or the shield, obviously he's doing both acts that causes the death of this person. But the question, the Torah looks at the act of murder, and at the moment of the act of murder, there's a preventative, and therefore, when you take away the ladder, the shield, or the medicine, it's back to grumma. Means if you put a person in the sun right away, the person starts dying from the sun. If you lock a person outside their house, and Ariel was right, the case that happened in Kansas City is being investigated as a murder. So if you lock someone out of their house and they freeze to death, right away the person is outside. He's starting to freeze immediately. But here, in this case over here, when you shoot, the person's not going to die. At the moment of the arrow leaving, there's medicine. You go and you spill out the medicine, that's grama. The question is when one learns this Gemara, there's two ways to approach the study of this Gemara. One is to see what's the law, what's Rav saying, and a person could react seemingly upset about the kind of law is this, that the person takes the medicine and spills it on the floor, and to someone takes away a shield. I mean, how's that not being judged? But what Rav is not coming to say is so much the law is to help us understand what is the Torah, how does the Torah view murder? What is it that we're judging? I mean, again, we're not going into if God's going to pay the person back and if the Bezdin has to take other actions. But the question over here what the Rav is analyzing isn't so much the law as helping us really understand what is it that the Torah considers an act of murder. As far as Bezdin is concerned, that the person has to be punished in one of the 4 deaths, which is to be beheaded. The act of murder that the Torah says, Lo sirtzach, which we're going to learn in this week's parsha, right? This week's Torah reading, we learned the 10 commandments, and one of the 10 commandments is do not murder. The act of do not murder, that the Torah prevents a person, the act of murder, that's what Rav is trying to understand. How do we understand the act of murder? What's defined? So the question, what Rav is saying is, the act of murder has to be an act of murder when you do the act. It's not, grama means it's not that you cause someone's death. You have to actually kill the person. And as long as there's a preventative, that's not an act of murder. Okay. So that's the 3rd case. We have the 4th case. So you spill out the medicine And appears in part because when you shot the arrow there, he could have been cured. Now this is the most extreme of the three cases so far is the case of the medicine, because you actually shot the person and there was no preventing the person from getting struck. I mean, the case of the ladder, you could have climbed out. The case of the shield, you never would be hit. Here, you're going to be hit. Nothing's stopping you from being hit. But the chiddush that Rav is coming to teach us in the third case is that if you could heal yourself, that's still not considered an act of murder, because at the moment when you shot the arrow, the person had a way to get out, to heal themselves. Now, Rav Ashi comes and adds even a more extreme case. Amar Bashi. Rav Ashi says, based on what Rav is saying, Hilkach, afilu samanim b'shuk, even if you don't have the medicine on you, but there's a pharmacy, and within a reasonable amount of time, the person could have gone to the pharmacy and bought or taken the medicine from somewhere else. Means the case that Rav presented is the person's holding the medicine in their hand. But here Rav Ashi says, what about Hilkach afilu samanim b'shuk? It's not in your hand. It's in the market, but you have to go get it. It's not in your possession, that means. So the question is, Rav Ashi learns into Rav, that's also not considered an act of murder. Just the very fact that you could have gotten something to prevent it, to heal yourself in the market, even if you don't, it's not in your possession, and you decided not to go buy it. Now, the question is, I wonder what, I mean, Rav Ashi is saying a very general case. What would be the case if the prosecutor could prove that the only way to get the medicine would be if you have to buy it and you had no money on you? So it's in the shuk, but you have no money on you. Like the question is how Rav Ashi's case is much more complicated, because you don't have it in your possession. So what does it mean it's in the shuk? What's the classification in the shuk? How accessible does it have to be? Does it have to be accessible that there's no question you could have gotten it? It means it was for free, or they would give it to you for free, or they would let's say there's a hospital, right? Everyone knows a hospital. It doesn't have to be a medicine, right? There's a hospital. A person will be cured in the hospital. The hospital's not going to ask you right away for payment. Afterwards, they'll deal with the payment. If you get hurt, there's an ambulance that's going to come pick you up. If there's an ambulance in the shuk, it's going to pick you up and you won't die. It's not a lethal weapon that's going to kill you right away. It's not going to kind of shot that's going to kill you away. You're going to bleed out. But if there's a hospital, then you should live. So Rav Ashi says in such a case, then it's also not considered an act of murder. So Amalei Rav Acha b'rei de Rava Rav Ashi. So the Rav Acha, the son of Rava, asked Rav Ashi, what about a scenario where, and this is a complicated case, what about a scenario where there was no medicine at the time of shooting? It means the first case is he's holding the medicine in the hand. The second case is there's medicine in the shuk, in the market, there's a hospital, right? The third case is there's no medicine at the time of shooting. But as soon as you get pierced, there's damin lo yisamanim, the medicine appears, becomes available. Medicine becomes available to you to heal you. So when I shot, the reasoning Rava says when you shot there was medicine, but here there's no medicine. But before you died, you could have cured yourself because medicine became available, and let's say you didn't use it. Mahu, what's the case in such a case? So Amrle, he said, Hariyoitsemi bezdin zakai. The person walked out of court innocent. What does that mean? Rashi says. Rashi says like this: before the court heard the case, we could find a merit for the person, which is medicine became available. Why didn't this person protect themselves? Why didn't this person cure themselves? An ambulance showed up. There's no ambulance in town. An ambulance showed up. A medic showed up. There was no medic in town. Someone got off the bus and was a medic, right? In a lot of cases we have. Unfortunately, what's going on now in Eretz Yisrael here, where someone has a gun and happens to get off the bus and saves everyone because kills the terrorist. I'm saying, so you have scenarios that show up afterwards. So here, the person showed up afterwards, and you didn't take advantage. The person who died, we're not talking to the dead person, the person's dead. But the person who was murdered didn't take advantage or didn't get healed from that person or from that medicine that appeared. And therefore, Rava says that this Rav Ashi says, he answers the son of Rava, evidently Rava already passed on by then, that that in such a case also, we find the merit. We find the merit for this person. Again, what we see is that the Bezdin, this is why it says in the Gemara and other places, very, very rarely did the courts exercise capital punishment. Very, very rarely. Murderers didn't go off free, but capital punishment was very rarely used. And why? Because it's very hard to be actually killed in capital punishment. You had to have warning, you had to acknowledge the warning, all that. Okay. So this is the third case. So the third
Rabbi,
case.
I have a small question, just as like kind of a adding some context, because not everybody, including my own memory, knows the beginning sections that we were studying for Sanhedrin, when it talked about the different number of rabbis needed for a base for a beis din like this. Can you remind us how many would have been over a capital punishment case?
Okay, again, very good, Shukin. This is this week's parasha when we learn about the system of judges that Yisro suggests to Moshe. It has to be a court of 23 for a capital case. A court of 3 only could deal with monetary cases. A capital case is 23. They had courts all across Eretz Yisrael of 23. And then, of course, there's the Sanhedrin, that's 71, but that's only in extreme cases. Now, even if you have a court of 23, the Jewish system is you have to have, for a case of guilty in murder, you have to have a majority of 2. So it wasn't just that one person. There's a majority of 1. A majority of 1 is not enough. It has to be a majority of 2. For innocence, a majority of 1 is enough, but for guilty, it has to be a majority of 2. And they had a system, because also if there was some people who didn't know, so they would sit people down. They had a backup system in the courts where they would be able to add up until 71 of people who's heard the whole case. So even in a Jewish case, in the Sanhedrin, Ketana, let's call it, of 23, the small Sanhedrin, we learned, like Shuki says in the previous Gemaras, he had a backup system of students, of let's say minor judges, who were qualified in case they need be to be upgraded to the major court, and they listened. They had 3 rows of 23, so there was really over 100 judges, potential judges, sitting in on a case, and close to 100 judges sitting in on.
But only 23 ruling.
Yeah, but we needed a 23. But if we needed to, we upgraded them to bring, and if to get it to majority, they would be able to upgrade the court up to 71. After 71, they would have to break their heads and figure out a ruling.
Bruce, does the American system have something like that, where there's a extra juror for long cases in case someone gets ill and can't attend or something?
Yes, for complex cases where there's likely to be, a couple of weeks of trial, there are alternate jurors. Normal jury is 12, but there may be 3 or 4 alternates that sit in the jury box. They don't get to vote unless one of the 12 has to excuse him or herself. And then an alternate juror is appointed, and they start the deliberations again.
From they're not used to like balance like a locked juror,
No.
right?
No. It's only a jury of 12.
Right.
And their only role is to be substituted for one of the original 12 who can't finish the service.
And they have to be there the entire time of the case to listen to all the information, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah. But there's like a criteria that a case has to meet where they worry about something like that, right?
Yes.
Normally it's just 12.
Normally 12. Sometimes there's 6 in smaller cases.
Okay. I think there's just so much context here in all of the different studies that we've been doing over the last few months, like the group of people that would be needed to find any of those people guilty, and all those different discussions that we had about relations and going like further. And even in like months and months ago, we were studying, like putting that context here, that there's 23 judges, proceeding on this case if you were going to have a capital punishment case. That's useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and so that and that's the case. But then that's the case over here. So I just want to say the Rashi says, what does it mean? What's the question if medicine appears or a healing opportunity appears after you shoot the person and it wasn't there when you shot the person? It says Nizdam Eloi Samanim. Rashi says Lamaka Achar Hamaka, after you hit the person's already been hit, not even after the person has shot. Let's say you shoot an arrow and it takes 30 seconds to hit the person, and then the medicine comes in those 30 seconds. That's not the question. Even after you were hit, you didn't buy it and you didn't heal yourself. Mahu. Rashi says, Mi amrin, and do we say you could have healed yourself? Even the B'shas Rika, or you say that the time that when there was do we say when the person was shooting, there was no medicine and he died, so you're mechayiv, you have to be killed. So Bezdin says again that if you find any kind of merit, he walks out of court again, not innocent, but he doesn't get put to death. Okay, now we're gonna have the fourth case. Amar Rav says, okay, let me just explain the case. Ariel, if I'm saying it wrong from different than when Rabbi Steinzelt says it, but this is the way I understand the case. The case is they had a dodgeball game once upon a time. Evidently, the ball wasn't an inflatable light ball. It was some sort of like something. I'm assuming something similar to a softball of an American, softball. So it's hard and it bounces, or baseball. And what you would do is you would throw the ball against the wall with the person you're playing with, and by the strategy of the game is you try to throw the ball against the wall in a way that until the person catches the ball off the bounce, you already have time to escape. It means you're looking for the ball to go furthest away from you and furthest away from the other person in order for it to be hard for the person to receive the ball on the bounce, and therefore you have time to run away. But the idea is basically that the person who catches the ball should try to catch it and then throw it at you and hit you. And if it hits you, then you're out, right? So those days they played with the kind of equipment like today. A bat could kill someone. A baseball used properly could kill someone. It's a stone practically. So what happens if the person really wants to murder his or her playing mate, and instead of trying to bounce the ball in the way that you would run away and be able to get safe, you try to bounce the ball that should ricochet off the wall and actually kill the person, right? So those who go to a baseball game, right? So if the pitcher hits the batter, right, if you don't have proper protection, the batter could die. I mean, you hit the baseball's coming at 100 miles an hour. That's a lethal weapon. Now, Rashi learns the case. Rashi doesn't learn the case as an intentional murder case. It means there's two ways to understand this. One is that you're looking to kill the person. The other case is where you're not looking to kill the person. Do you kill the person? A pitcher who throws 100-mile fastball, and for whatever reason, the helmet or what have you, it hits the person and kills the baseball player or the catcher or the umpire. Right? These are people that are standing there. And is that considered a case of shogeg? Do you have to go to galus? Halacha Torah law is if you kill someone by mistake, in certain cases, not all mistake killing, but certain cases of mistaken killing, you have to go to exile. And basically you have to uproot your life and move to one of the cities of refugees, and you live there until the death of the high priest. That's the law of shogeg, of galus. And while if you ever leave, there's no guards, but if you ever leave the city of refuge, then the family of the person who's killed, we're not going to say murdered because it was by mistake, has the right and almost the obligation to kill you. It's called goal hadam. Goal hadam means family, people that are looking have an interest in the person who's been killed, and they're allowed to kill you anytime you leave the city of refuge until the passing of the high priest. Once the high priest passes away, you've done your time. So hypothetically, if the high priest lasted a year, you do a year. If it lasted a month, you do. If it lasted a day, you do a day. If he lives like Yochanan Cohen Gadol for 80 years, you're in Gulish for 80 years. If you do it in the beginning of his term, there's scenarios that you can never get released if there was no Cohen Gadol at the time of your exile. If there was in between high
What
priest.
if the Kohen Gadol passes before you get there?
Yeah, so they have there are cases where if there's no Kohen Gadol, like let's say it's in between, they're appointing new Kohen Gadol, or the Kohen Gadol himself kills by mistake, right? The Kohen Gadol himself is also able to kill by mistake. So there are scenarios that you never get exiled, you never get released.
My question was more of if you were on your way there and the Kohen Gadol died, but you hadn't yet gone into the city.
I
Then
think
you
that's
could turn around and go back. You never have to go in, or you still have to.
Thanks, Emily. I have to check the Rambam again. The Rambam brings different scenarios. I think in such a case, if you haven't yet entered the city of refuge, then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's such a case that you would have to stay. If there's no Kohen Gadol when time you enter, but you have to remember something else. There's two scenarios. Everyone who killed went to the city of refuge. Even if you killed intentionally, if you're amazed, and eventually they would pull you out and try you and all that. So but until that trial, you went to the city of refuge, because again, you were the family of the person you murdered. In the case of even intentional murder, has the right and almost the obligation to seek you out and kill you. But what they would do is they would run to the city of refuge, and then Beis Din would pull them out. If they are found guilty, they get put to death. Same thing with shogeg. You kill someone, you run to the city of refuge. Then they pull you out and they judge you. If they find that you did it by mistake, so sometimes you'd have to go into exile. Sometimes say, well, this is a kind of mistake that doesn't qualify for exile. Either it's closer to intentional, or it's closer to it's really not shogeg. It's like almost ones. It was almost totally out of your control, where the Torah would say, no, that's not a case of even mistaken murder, and therefore the family can't touch you. But that's another law. It's another subject. We're not there yet. That's the laws of Ori Miklat. But here we have a case. This is what Rashi says.
I have a question real quick before we dive into the Rashi, just so I understand this better. Did this put some pressure on the Kohanim, on the Kohanim Gedolah, like that when there was like a lot of political strife in the community at the time? Whenever, I know the history of it is that there was a lot of rotation at some points in the early Jewish history. And so I'm curious, like, were there bodyguards, or so like a secret service almost, like back then, protecting the Kohen Gadol when there was something really big going on, to make sure that someone didn't just get rid of the Kohen Gadol and like nullify all of these people that might be waiting for a court case?
Interesting.
Or is it too sinister to plan back so many thousands of years?
Yeah, but first of all, I think the case of the Kohen Gadol only applies to the person who's been found to have killed by mistake. I mean, the person who's amazed, no matter what, gets pulled out and judged. That he doesn't get the protection of the Kohen Gadol. It's only the person who's judged, and they found that the person did it by mistake. Let's say what Rashi is saying. Let's say according to our Rashi, if this is a case of Galus, what Rashi is basically going to try to figure out is what case is considered that he has to go to exile or she has to go to exile, or what cases are they even not required to go to exile? It means the court will check and say, this dodgeball game, the murder happened so randomly that this is not considered a mistaken killing, and therefore, you're free to go home. And so according to Rashi, doesn't look at it as a case of intentional murder. It's a question of what type of mistaken murder is it? And the question is, in the sport, what was your intention? Like if a baseball, for instance, give an example in baseball. If a baseball, when you're trying to throw a baseball over the plate, that's your intention. Your intention is to throw it 100 miles over the plate. If when you throw the ball, some reason something happens to your hand and the ball randomly flies to the third baseman and kills the third baseman, that's not the same case as by mistake killing the batter as by mistake killing the third baseman, because we weren't even trying to throw the ball to the third baseman. Some reason or another went out and it killed him. So that would be a case where you don't even have to go to exile. Whereas if you hit the batter, everyone knows that if you're going to hit the batter, you're going to kill him. But you weren't looking to hit the batter, but it was within reason that you would possibly hit him. Okay, let's see the case inside. Amar Rava says, Zarak Tzror, they threw a ball or a rock, what have you, based on this kind of game. B'kotel, against the wall. V'chazra lachra, and the ball bounces off the wall. V'harga, and kills a person. Tzarash, the Rava says, chayiv. In such a case, that's chayiv. That's not considered, here Rava draws the line. That's not considered grama. Meaning to say, if you took the rock and threw it directly at a person and killed him, everyone knows that's considered murder. But here the question is, it bounces off the wall. But if you know how to bounce a rock off the wall to kill someone, that's considered murder. We're not going to go into the case of koch kochoy, meaning is how much of the strength, is it the wall throw, does the wall push it off, or is it your strength that threw it at the wall push it off? That's the question, really. So Rava says this is your strength, because the only reason it ricochets off like that is because you threw it hard against the wall. So that's considered an act of murder, or if by mistake, it's considered an act of mistaken murder. So that's considered chayiv. So now we're going to learn the case about the sport. Tana tuna kigoin. So the Mishnah wants to bring an example. Kigoin elu, for instance, those people hamasachim bekadur. They play a kind of a dodgeball or something. Shahargu b'mezid. That if you kill intentionally, nehargin, you get killed. It means if you throw the ball and it hits the person and you aim to hit the person, obviously you have to have warning. For the people who have the girsa of mezid, you have to have warning. Don't do it. Don't try to hurt the person. Don't try to kill the person. Is nehargin, you get killed. V'shoigig, and if you do it by mistake, goyland, you go to exile. You go to the city of refuge. It means you have to go to exile. So the Gemara says, b'shoigig goylin, if you kill someone by mistake, pshita, that's obvious. Any case of mistaken murder is to you have to go to exile. Most cases. So the Gemara says, the case over here is, the chiddush over here is that if you kill someone intentionally by aiming, through hitting off the wall and killing the person instead of playing the sport, that's the case that the Mishnah has to teach us. Mal the time I would have thought, asra safeki, it's not a real warning. What do you mean it's not a real warning? Because it's not a guarantee that every time you throw a ball against the wall, it's gonna ricochet. Because if you shoot a gun at someone and you're aiming at a person, you put it at the person's body, so it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to kill the person. So the warning is a complete warning. Here you're saying that we know you know how to play cricket, or you know how to play dodgeball, you know how to play racquetball, and therefore don't try to kill the person. But it's not a proper warning, because it's you would think it's not a proper warning because it's a suffix, it's a doubt. It may not hit him, the person may run. There's a lot of ways to get out of this case. So mi emer dehader, who says it's going to bounce back? Kamash Mulan comes to teach us that no, if you know what you're doing and we know that you know what you're doing and we warn you not to do it, that's considered an active murder. Okay, so that's the case of using the ball in the game, not to play the game, but you try to kill the person in the sport itself. Okay. Again, I'm sure you have to. I don't know the laws of wrestling or boxing or all that stuff. But I'm quite certain that in all those cases, there's a sports that could end up being lethal, and I'm sure you have to sign a waiver, some sort of another, that doesn't hold the other person responsible in the case. But I'm sure also that if the judges saw someone literally attack and try to kill a person and use it as an act of wrestling or boxing, it may be a little different. Okay, but these are all basically these kind of questions where you could cloud intention and cloud focus, because it's a sport. I'm playing a sport. The ball bounces off the wall. We know the ball bounced off the wall. Yeah, but you threw it on the wall in a way to kill the person. Okay. So Tani Rav Tachlifa, Rabbi Tachlifa Bar Maravu comes from the west. Kamed Rabavo, in front of Rabavo. He says another case. Kigoin Elu, what about these people? Hamasachim Bekader, they also play this kind of dodgeball. Again, where you bounce the ball off the wall and so here the Rashi goes in to explain more the strategy of the game, that you're trying to for the game's sake, you want the ball to go further away from your playmate, so you have time to run away. If you throw the ball off the wall and he catches it right away and you're standing right there and he throws it at you, you're out. That's not a good strategy for the game. So you're trying to make it that it bounces in such, it's like tennis, right? You're trying to get it to bounce in a certain way that the person has a hard time getting access to the ball, and therefore he has a harder time to throw at you and get you out. I don't know if that game is played anymore. Maybe too many people got hurt. So Tani Rabbi Tachlifa Bar Marava. The Rabbi Tachlifa on the west said, Kamed Rabavo, Gon Elu, those, Hamsachim Mekadu, they play with the ball. Again, it's a kind of ball that could hurt someone or kill someone and used as a weapon. Shahargu Toich Arba Amas. Let's say you throw it at someone. Rashi's learning this case to be unintentional. And the question is, now we're analyzing, even if it's unintentional, do you have to even go to exile? I hear what you're saying, Emily, but this is the lacha doesn't work in it that way. Emily's saying to punish just to keep people from doing acts of negligence, but the question is the Torah has to analyze what was the intention of the person. So here in this case, Rabbi Vo says like this: Shahargu toich arba amis. If you throw the ball, and within 4 cubics, which is about, let's say, 12 feet, the ball bounces back and hits your playmate and kills him. And according to the first pshat in Rashi, is a question of exile or not. So Rashi says pat. So the Gemara says pater. You don't even have to go to exile. We'll see why. Chutz la'arbamis. Let's say the ball bounces outside of the 4 cubics, which is about 12 feet. Chayiv. Then you do have to go to exile. So the Gemara wants to analyze the ruling. What's the difference between inside 4 cubics or outside 4 cubics? The basic thinking is that let's say you killed someone by mistake. You didn't mean to kill the person. The question is, you have to go into exile. Was it negligence to the extent that you didn't act right, and do you have to go to exile because you did something that caused someone's death? That's what is exile? Exile is basically you didn't have intention, but you caused someone's death out of being reckless. It's basically prison for manslaughter. It's like you go to it's not it's a prison. There's no guards and all, but you're never allowed to leave the city of refuge. So the question is this: if it goes inside 4 cubics, you obviously, and it was his own mistake, and it's not intention. So you obviously weren't looking to this is not what you wanted to do, because the sport is that it should bounce far away. So you didn't do what you wanted to do. So it wasn't. So even the act that killed the person wasn't an act that you wanted to do. It's like I said, you throw the ball and hits the third baseman. You weren't looking to throw it at the third baseman. So that's not considered like throwing the ball and by mistake hitting the batter. Here is because you're looking for the ball to go far and it went short. That means it didn't go according to plan. So the Gemara asks like this: Amalei Ravina Ravashi, hey Chitami, what's the case of the sport? If that's what you want, that the ball should go only 2 feet or 2 cubics, afilu portanami. Then even if it goes only 2 feet, and if by mistake kills the person, you should have to go to exile because that's what you wanted to do. That was your strategy. You used, it's like a punt. There's a difference between a punt and a base hit, right? You were looking to punt it. The person thought you're going to try to throw it, moved back, and you try to do a light throw against the wall, so it should go back short, so he would have to run forward to get the ball, right? That's another strategy in the sport. And for some reason or another, end up killing the person. So but if that was your intention and it killed the person, so why is that not considered enough of an act that you should have to go to exile? But let's say you didn't want it to go the distance that it went. That doesn't make a difference what the distance is. If the distance is 4 feet or 2 feet or 8 feet, it's not what you intended. Then even if it goes past 4 cubics, you shouldn't have to go. Why are we judging it based on space? Based on the logic of the sport, why aren't we basing it on the strategy of the sport, of the individual playing the sport? So Amalei says like this, and this is an interesting ruling, because the question is stronger almost than the answer. So he says, no, we're not going to go after the individuals trying unique, you have players who have the unique strategy in the sport. That I want to punt it. How many people? What's the percentage? Maybe Ariel, you're into baseball. What's the percentage of punts versus people going for base hits? I'm sure it's in low double-digit numbers. I don't know.
Very low, single digits.
Yeah, so that's not.
It's so low to the point where most people don't do it, and oftentimes they have people who come in to do it specifically as pinch hitters.
To do a punt.
Yeah, a bunt. Yeah,
a bunt. Sorry. So over here, the Gemara says a ruling. Means the Rabbi Tachlifa says like this: if the ball goes within 4 feet, then that the sport, that's not the logic of the sport. Maybe the player tries to get around and do his own or her own little sneaky way to play it, like like a bunt as opposed to a base hit. Baseball is based on a base hit, but you're trying to bunt it to try to fool the infield goes out, and then you bunt it, so you're going to have time to run in to get a base hit. So Rab Tachlifa says an amazing ruling. That the question is a good question. The question is, why don't we just analyze what the person's intention was? If I was looking to throw the ball that should go far, and I hit the person when he's far or she's far, then my intentions was there. I didn't want to look to kill the person, but I looked at that was what I wanted to do in the sport, and it killed the person, then I would have to go to exile. And if I wasn't looking for it to go far, and it went far by mistake, and it killed the person, that shouldn't be my intention. And the Torah needs that there has to be some sort of it has to be an act that you wanted to do that act. And the act, but you didn't want to kill the person through that act. So therefore you have to go to exile. So that's the question. Yeah, go ahead.
A quick search shows 2.5% would make you a very frequent bunter.
2.5%. See, there you go.
Would be very frequent. So a lot less than that.
So thank you, Ariel. So therefore, but the Gemara answer is no. The answer to the Gemara is no. We're not going to analyze the individual player's strategy. We're going to analyze the strategy of the sport. And like Ariel just says, that if the strategy in the sport is that less than 2.5% bunting is what's used, then that's not considered the proper way to play the game. That's a unique scenario. And therefore, even if the person's intention for it to go less than 4 feet, and it went less than 4 feet and it killed the person, but in the sport, that's not the way it usually is done. It's actually quite kind of a crazy ruling. Now you see Rashi says, it's all about the questioning is all about the machshava, the intention. It means the intention not to kill the person, but the intention of the action, of the sport. And if you didn't do what you wanted to do in the sport, and by mistake it killed the person, so you would that you would think let's just ask the player what he was looking to do, or let's try to analyze what the player is trying to do. And the Gemara says no, we only go after the rule, how the sport is traditionally played. And like Rashi says that the sport is you go closer to the wall and you try to throw it so it should go further back, and therefore if it goes less than four cubics, that's not a good round. And even if your intentions was like that, that's still not considered a good round. That's not considered an act, and therefore you don't have to go to exile. And if it goes more, even if that wasn't your strategy, you have to go back. You have to go to exile. And Rashi finishes off and says there are those who actually analyze this case, in a case of intentional killing. That means that the case isn't about mistaken killing, but intentional killing. And Rashi doesn't go in to say how would such a case work. Basically, you want to know that if a person was trying to kill someone and if it goes within 2 feet, so that's not enough of intentional killing. So we're not going to go into the second understanding of Rashi because it's very complicated. And if you look on the right hand side, there's a very long Tosfos that says there's no way that Rashi's second opinion could be accurate. There's no way that this could be a question of capital punishment because it's such a random case of a sport and trying to kill someone. But I mean, again, using baseball as an example, sorry to keep on using the same one, but part of the strategy of hardball pitching is to intimidate the batter. And intimidating the batter is you're trying to scare him by throwing a fastball a little inside and throwing the person off the plate. That's part of the strategy, is to rattle up the batter. So the batter's actually scared for his safety when he's standing at the plate. And they had plenty of, I don't know if you guys remember, in the 80s and the 90s, you had pitchers that today it's not so common, that every once in a while would hit a guy, and intentionally as well. And so it's a very risky thing. And the Gemara has to, and we analyze these cases, what happens if it turns into a fatal injury. Okay, let's just go a little further. So these are the 4 cases that Rava says. Now the Gemara wants to understand a basic question. The basic question is, koch kochai. When you do something, it has to be coming from your strength. So in this case of the ball, it's not it's not a direct hit. If you shoot an arrow, it's your koach. If you throw someone into the pit, it's your energy that shoved the person in. Over here, the question is, if you're throwing it off the wall, it ricochets off the wall. Is that considered? We don't know if that's considered your koach. Now, where do we have scenarios where this is a question? So just to say outside, maybe we won't go on the inside till next week. We have the law of the red heifer. The laws of the red heifer are complicated on a good day, but also the procedure of the red heifer is complicated. It means that you took a red heifer, a cow that had absolutely totally red and doesn't have any two hairs that are not red and born and has never been worked, and it's very and the children of the Kohanim that had to deal with the red heifer can have never become impure. So the mothers actually give birth to the children in the buildings in the space of the holy temple. The children would be born in the temple, raised in the temple, never leave the temple. Obviously, after they become a little older, they leave. But as long as their parents designate them to be available in the case they need to do a red heifer, and you have to remember, in close to 800, close to 1,000 years from when the Jewish people left Egypt until the destruction of the second temple, there was only 9 red heifers, right? So it's an average of a red heifer every 100 years. But nevertheless, there was those mothers who wanted to have their children available to be part of the procedure of making the red heifers. So you have to imagine many children were born in the temple that never ended up getting the job. And I'm sure there are many people that were born in the temple, even if they did a red heifer, didn't get the job. But the idea basically was they would take the children over these special kind of what are they called? Bridges. So they're never really stepping on the ground, and they had to walk to the mountain because the red heifer wasn't done in the temple, it was done opposite the temple. Very complicated procedures to do the red heifer. But one of the things is that after you burn the red heifer and put in all the ingredients, there's different ingredients you had to put it into the fire. The ash of the red heifer is what we're looking for. And then they preserve the ash. And anytime someone became impure, we're talking about any time we're talking about if a person went to a levaya, if you went to a funeral, you've become impure pretty much. You go into the cemetery. You had to be sprinkled by the waters of the red heifer in order to go into the temple. If you wanted to go into the temple, you would have to be sprinkled on the waters of the red heifer. Now, what was the waters? The water itself was complicated. The water had to be special water, maim chaim. It wasn't any water; it had to be live water. So they had to have a whole drain system that the water should never be put in a cup outside of when it's being ready to be turned into sprinkle water. And then you had to put the ash on top of the water. Now, part of the requirement was you had to put directly the ash on the water. What happens if you put the ash and it bounces off the side of the bowl onto the water? Is that considered placing the ash on the water? And we want to compare that to the case of the rocket ball. In the case of the red heifer, that's considered not placing the ash on the water, because you put it on the side, it bounced off the side of the bowl onto the water. And so therefore, if that's not considered properly placing the ash on the water, why is it considered killing someone with your strength when it bounces off the wall? So that's basically the case of the Gemara and learn. Then we wanted to compare also when you sprinkle the water. When you sprinkle the water has to go directly on what you're trying to make pure. If it bounces off something and sprinkles and something that is not impure, like a piece of earthenware that doesn't get impure and that can't be purified, bounces off the earthenware and hits the utensil that you're trying to purify, that's also not considered that you've sprinkled the water on it. So seemingly, again, we're trying to ask, why is the case of the rocket ball considered your koyach, your strength that killed someone? Forget your intention. Even if you intended to kill someone, this is not considered your strength killing someone because it bounced off the wall. If bouncing off a pot or earthenware is not considered sprinkling this ash or the water, why would it be considered sprinkling, hitting someone? Also, it's the same idea, the same theory. We'll learn all about that next week. Laila Tov, everyone. Take care and have a good evening.
Laila Tov, Rabbi. Thank you.